Hello, hello. So, this panel here is called Cosmos and Ethereum Converging into One Ecosystem, question mark. And that is the question which we will hopefully tease out the answer to today. My name is Drew. I'm working at a new node infrastructure company, one of the sponsored, called Axel.io. Previously, I used to be protocol specialist at LitoDAO, AO LitoDAO people. And before that, I did node ops and protocol specialist at Blockdaemon. And would you guys like to introduce yourself?
My name's Sam. I'm a DevRel engineer at the Cosmos SDK. I don't know if you caught Faku's talk before. Basically, we enable people to build sovereign application-specific blockchains in the Cosmos ecosystem. So I am the Cosmos representative today.
Hi, I'm Caron. I am a protocol specialist at CoinMetrics. Before that, I also used to be at Blockdaemon. My background is more data, especially EVM and Solana virtual machine. So it's a bit less Cosmos, so yeah. I'll defer to Sam on those questions, but I would like to champion the other side.
An ETH maxi, if you will. So I'll try to bridge the gap between the Ethereum and Cosmos stuff because I'm just kind of a degenerate all around. And I guess we'll go ahead and dive into the questions. So basically, is it Cosmos being converging with Ethereum, or is it something else? Is it the app chain thesis becoming more true? Is the monolithic chain becoming more true? What are we seeing kind of developing? Whoever wants to pick it up first.
So, I mean, it is a difficult question because so many people have different viewpoints on this. But currently, as I see it, there is a lot of bridges that are happening. I mean, so I guess with the emergence of Celestia, a lot of people are talking about modularity a lot, right? So yeah, and people are making kind of that, they're talking about it, they're wanting to use it, and basically we can see that there are a lot of, I guess, crossovers that are happening between Ethereum and Cosmos, with the likes of EigenLayer and building AVSs on top of EigenLayer, such as Ethos. So, which basically what this does, it enables or leverages the validator set from Ethereum and makes Cosmos more secure, which is what a lot of people, I guess, worry about. It's if you launch a sovereign chain, what does the security on that look like? So, I mean, yes, that's kind of where I kind of see it taking off, and people sort of having this or leaning into this modular kind of narrative.
My take is that modularity has been around for a while. In the past, it was more, not modularity, but the convergence has been around for a while. Before, people like nothing more than their bags. Right? In the past, in the previous bull run, everything was about how do I get my bags to a different layer one or a different side chain so I can participate in this 300% APY yield farming, right? Nowadays, it's similar, but it's more about the tech rather than the assets. Back then, everybody was trying to form bridges, build new bridges that were all rupturing all over the place, losing tons of value to hacks and so on. Now everyone's trying to do it with modular stacks. And in the end, achieving the same thing, or trying to achieve the same thing. You've got so many people with huge ETH bags that are just sitting there earning 3%. What do they want? They want to use that elsewhere. And who makes the money? The person who comes in and says, hey, I can help you use those bags elsewhere. And so I'm not I'm not very happy with the current market conditions and all the projects that are currently leading the charts in terms of points and et cetera. Because yeah, that's all it is. It is catering to the people with the big bags. How can we convince them to support us because they want their bags to grow?
That's great. Let's tease on that little points part. And first off, I would like to address, I'm sorry the market is making you feel sad, Caron. That is a real bummer. That really is. Talking about the points and kind of what aspects are superfluous in a post-convergence world? Do you think points are kind of part of this, or do you think they're a clever funding mechanism?
It's the same thing as before, right? The points are just tokens without actually being tokens, and eventually they'll be seen as such. It's a derivative. It's basically a future on their token, right? But you don't know much about it. You don't know what you're going to get in the end. You're investing into this token without actually knowing what's coming out on the other end. And you're investing with your time and with your other funds. You're depositing funds on Blast, so you get a bunch of points, so you eventually get some form of token. I don't know. But it's the same thing.
Pumponomics, if you will.
Exactly.
Excellent. Would you like to comment on that? No. Okay. So let's speak a little bit more on the projects that are bringing about this. What sort of projects come to mind for you guys first?
Like bridging this kind of gap
Yeah.
between the two ecosystems. Hold on, I need to put this down. Like I mentioned, EigenLayer is definitely one of them. It's kind of like the first layer, and then everyone's like which has enabled people to build AVSs on top. And so because of these, I think, I keep doing this, because of this, there's been, so many people, so many projects that have been coming up, which are AVSs, that have, wanted to use the SDK. I'm just going from experience, basically. There's just been 3 or 4 projects in the last week that, are doing this and trying to do this. Because what's actually missing in Cosmos is this distribution kind of aspect. People aren't coming to Cosmos first. So maybe this is a way to potentially bridge this gap.
Awesome. Caron? Projects that are helping bring about the convergence of,
Or not,
of the monolithic or app chain
You can
pieces.
say something negative as well.
You can say something negative. It's a safe space here. These people won't riot. They're sweaty.
Yeah, so just following this, I do have negative things to say about EigenLayer, yeah, but I'll save that. I do think it's cool how a lot of people are piecing together a bunch of this awesome tech that we have in this space in different manners to bring about new. It reminds me of that thing where you rolled together different Pokemon and made a mutant Pokemon. I don't know exactly what it was called. What?
A Cronenberg?
Yeah, was that what it was called? All right.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a bit like that. And people are trying things all over the place. A very interesting one I found was Eclipse, which was using Celestia, right, for DA, rolling up to Ethereum, but under the hood it's a Solana virtual machine. So it's Solana on Ethereum using the asset ETH.
What are the risks of that?
Well, there's tons of risks, right?
Let's hear them.
Sure. Risk number 1, utilizing Celestia for data availability.
Why?
So a big risk for modularity is they're not meant to work together from the get-go, right? They weren't designed to work together from the get-go.
On a protocol level.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's going back to what I was originally saying is you follow the bags again. So Eclipse is only working because it is promising that it'll run on ETH, right? A lot of these Bitcoin L2s are only as hyped as they are, only as highly funded as they are right now because they're promising they'll run on Bitcoin. So it's less about the tech and less about how everything will work phenomenally together and more about how can it bring more value to that underlying token or coin. And that's what I'm bearish about.
Okay. And I forgot my point now. we kind of went around, like. Yeah.
Two mics at once. Thank you. So basically, okay. So then why don't we talk about eigenlayer? Do you guys want to talk about eigenlayer?
I mean, I think I've said like most of. I mean, it's basically I don't have much to say about it apart from what I've said. I would say, but
It seems it's.
I think you want to have some time on this.
I'll kind of like lead you a little bit with this. Is that like a lot of what eigenlayer on a technical level is trying to do is like bridge two protocols. The only thing that an L2 is, all bullshit terms aside, is an L2 is just a protocol that settles to another L1, typically Ethereum or Bitcoin, right? Similarly, eigenlayer is sharing the economic security of a protocol with an application. They already have this in Cosmos. It's called SES, shared security. ICS. Interchain shared security, acronyms. But basically it is sharing the economic weight, and as you actually measure how it is worth, the actual revenue on that is about less than 0.5%. So basically it's not a very appealing product from a revenue point. So what eigenlayer is doing differently is they're allowing you to also do this, but increase the leverage extremely. And then there's also, it's taking part of this airdrop meta that we see going on as everyone is kind of socially incentivized by following whatever the most topical airdrop is. And it's become such a thing that there's entire protocols that create a secondary market of these points, like Pendle.fi, if you guys have heard about this. And then this is how we can kind of figure out how the market is pricing in these points and what they are predicting that the returns on this protocol should be. So basically, what I'm saying is the only difference between eigenlayer and interchain security is mostly the sort of leverage that you can apply to the system.
Can I add something just to?
Go ahead.
In a way, then, aren't we taking some of the tech, like something else that is a shared or like that we're taking from Cosmos is the technology. I think fundamentally, like Cosmos has really good like technology, and I think it's kind of, this is a good example of taking that technology and using it within Ethereum.
Exactly. It's the same-ish tech in a different language applied to a hot narrative. That's more or less. Would you like to talk on that?
Yeah, and a different asset. But yeah, eigenlayer is what Cosmos and Polkadot have been doing for years, just with a lot more duct tape right now. Yeah, ETH staking was not designed with this in mind. Right? You could already easily reuse staked ETH as security for your app if you wanted to, but people didn't want to. And now eigenlayer comes in and says, hey, we've got this, and then they leverage you up with Hopium, and now you're getting those 40% yields on your ETH, which is impossible because everybody else is the people who aren't restaking, they're getting 3%, right? Almost nothing.
Exactly.
I don't know what my point was.
No, I mean, that is basically the point, is that you have to take a step back and say, this is technically a technological advancement, but are you drawn to it for the tech, or are you drawn to it for the APR? And the people who have been around since Terra Luna, I think we all know how this story ends. The money has to come from somewhere. And basically, my assertion is that the problem never was with people not having enough economic security for their application. It's people making trash applications. We all grow up and we're used to using iPhones. We're used to having really good user experience. The user experience in Web3, I love it, but it is like taking a shower with your socks on. It is atrocious. And that is more of the thing that is stifling the growth of the entire pie versus one person being able to deploy an application and have superior economic security.
Of all the ecosystems, I think Cosmos has the best UX. So if we're talking about a convergence,
But is it
maybe Ethereum can take something from there.
I feel like that's saying something.
Is it? Oof.
That's bad.
Is it Cosmos or is it IBC?
What is Cosmos or IBC?
Would you say that it is because of the fact that Cosmos is modular and you can create modular extensions at the protocol level? Or is it because people are adopting IBC, inter-blockchain communication, and being able to transfer from one Cosmos chain to another?
But about like the UX being good, or like, I mean, I personally don't think the UX is that great in Cosmos. I feel like
What are some
it must be.
examples?
I actually haven't used Polkadot before, but like saying that is a big kind of comment, I would say, because
Yeah.
like I mean, osmosis is pretty good, but then you have all these like extra steps that you have to do, and I find like if you've got someone like, I don't know, your mum, and you try to explain it to them, like they're not really going to get it, but they could probably, you know, log into their bank, right? So that's kind of the difference. That's like the ease that you want to get eventually, but I don't think we're there yet.
That makes sense. So then, is EigenLayer in this case it's useful for the narrative point of converging the two ecosystems more than the project itself? Would you guys agree with that?
I need to have a think on that.
Correct.
I think it's dangerous to force a convergence with something that is subpar. So I think the tech should lead the convergence rather than the other way around. So if we're trying to force something just to, again, ensure that somebody's bags are yielding more, that's going to fail, right? That's going to fail eventually. So it needs to be done more carefully than it's being done right now. And now everybody's everyone's jumping in to get more points. And that's
I love
not the
points.
way to do it. Yeah, I know you do.
So you're telling me points are not good?
No, you're selling your soul.
Well, that's terrible news. The weather at 5.
I do want to say something like, I do think this narrative is important, but I obviously do think that, I think that the things being built on top of EigenLayer are really great pieces of technology, but they're not fully like scoped out or fledged out. Like we haven't actually seen them in production yet. So, I mean, until this happens, then we don't have any real substance kind of to go off, or like, something real to really go off to see, is it safe, etc. So, but I'm very hopeful I'm very hopeful, I would say. I'm more like the optimist in this situation.
I feel you. Breathing deep of the hopium. Aren't we all? Excellent. So let me find another one. So then what aspects do you guys see like superfluous in a post-convergence world? To kind of circle back on this question, like you said tech should lead innovation. Then if we can't use bridges and we shouldn't use eigenlayer, what's a better solution?
Let's talk about assets again. If we're converging, can we get rid of some of those, right? Because that's what I would say the Cosmos ecosystem is quite. There's a lot of assets that are being used for security. Each app is running with its own coin, as far as I understand it, and you've got your own validators in each little corner, and then they all interact. Is that, yeah. Whereas in Ethereum, you've got ETH, and then Eigenlayer is trying to make it so ETH is that king figure in a more widespread ecosystem where everything's running off of this royal figure in the center, which is ETH. Now, I don't know if there's any political scientists in here who are going to crucify me for saying this, but isn't a single leader a more efficient way of running a system rather than hundreds?
I was going to say something else, but like.
So if everybody congregates around ETH as the asset that is providing security in the entire ecosystem, isn't that more efficient than having a bunch of assets from Cosmos? So basically my answer to the question is that all of those assets are now superfluous.
I guess that depends, because on Ethereum, it's not like projects always release a meme token, which they call a governance token. So I wouldn't say that projects on Ethereum necessarily don't have tokens, or that Eigenlayer is
No, but they're not providing security. They're not designed to provide security.
Yeah, so in the case, basically you're saying that like Eigenlayer, because it's accepting ETH and also all of these LSTs, it's prioritizing ETH above all of them.
Why does Osmosis need its own validators when you have Cosmos Hub that could provide security, right? That's my question. Like in a post-convergence world, could ETH provide security for everything, right? Could it provide security for Osmosis?
Programmatically, no. And I'll tell you why.
Not programmatically, I mean theoretically.
Theoretically, there's no way to do so without involving liquidity. So in Osmosis case, you need a base token to pair against all the other tokens, and basically a token that acts as a singular liquidity token, and in this case it's also a governance token. But there are a lot of things that are built into the protocol that take an actual concrete, different approach than Ethereum. Haters are going to hate me for this, but Ethereum's initial design doesn't think of a lot of externalities in the way of like, the fact that Lido exists and Lido is so big is only because there was no liquid staking layer or code put into Ethereum. And it has involved these beautiful people here and a bunch of other externalities and discussions around governance and whether they should or shouldn't exist, or whether they should or shouldn't be enshrined. Not commenting on whether that is true. But if you compare that to Osmosis, you have a token that, yes, it has to exist by the nature of the protocol. They have to have validators. This protocol is paired against all these other tokens. But you don't have to worry about things like MEV. You don't have to worry about sub-projects tokens within it. Like MEV, for instance, on Osmosis was handled by the skip.money team. So basically what they said is they went to these open source developers And they said, instead of creating this like stupid like auction market where it's basically run by bots and like people that run all of these bots and doing these MEV and builders and all this complexity, why don't you maintain this package which handles the MEV within the protocol? All of the MEV is captured by the protocol and channeled back to the Osmo token. It's so this whole MEV thing, we don't even got to talk about it almost, because it just basically, it exists and it is measurable, but instead they created a governance motion and said, hey, you guys are developers, you guys love making these packages, make and sustain MEV on osmosis, and we'll give you a 10 to 20%, you can look at the governance proposal, but like cut of the commission, which is not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. Like the MEV market on Ethereum is massive, but it's enough to fund open source development. So I think there's like concretely just like a different approach to how we handle the protocol and how we handle things like MEV. And so I see them as like a big value add. And I personally kind of lean towards the application specific thing, because there's certain products that they require certain constraints, like DYDX. Try running an order book exchange on Ethereum. You will cry yourself to death. It's just not going to happen. But you can do that with Cosmos SDK. Would you like to take the other side of this?
So the way you explained MEV on osmosis seems to me like a more naive approach to a problem that should be handled by the open market. And it seems like now it's a government entity coming in, managing all the MEV, and then funding social goods with that. Sounds a lot like nationalizing rail, right? So instead of having like the system in the UK where you have a bunch of private companies running railroads across the country, you now have a government entity that's running all the rail. And I think, well, Germany doesn't have a nationalized rail system, but it's half nationalized. And you can see it's running much less smoothly than the UK's is, right? And they're here. So should you be giving your MEV up to one entity which is promising to do good? Yeah, that might work now because the Cosmos ecosystem is, they're working together and they all have the same goal in mind, but what happens when they don't anymore, right? What happens when it grows up and people from outside the ecosystem come in and then they say, hold on, this single entity isn't handling the MEV as perfectly as an open market could.
But it's not a single entity. It's open source software and a bunch of validators. In this case, so the validators are running this as like a sidecar, and it's just scooped up just naturally. Now that doesn't always necessarily affect cross-chain MEV. So like say this isn't necessarily the case today, but we'll say Solana tokens get integrated onto Osmosis. Arbing the price between Osmosis and Solana, that would be outside of the scope of the protocol, but all of the MEV that is within the protocol is handled, and it just goes back to the token, so it just goes to the base liquidity of the protocol. So it's not like communism on chain, as you would say, but it's more just like a different approach to maintaining software. But okay, excellent. So then, I guess, shall we talk about bridges?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. So, do you see bridges basically? Bridges are basically going to be like a core part of this conversation of app chains versus monolithic chains. because that was kind of the only solution we had up until now. So I'll kind of catch people up in the audience up as to what a bridge is. So a bridge is a place, it's typically like a contract, we'll say on Ethereum. You got 1 ETH, you send it to this contract on Ethereum, they validate it, they create a proof, and then they unlock your 1 ETH on another chain. And it's a bridge. But the fact of the matter is that it becomes a negative network effect, basically meaning that the more people that send ETH to this one contract, the more trusted it becomes, of course, because we all want to use a bridge that's safe, because we all know about bridge hacks. And so we go with what we think is safe, and it becomes the biggest thing. And then there's also more of an incentive to exploit that bridge, thus a negative network effect. It's counter to what building networks is all about, building blockchain networks. That's the core product that we're selling here. So bridges were really counter to that. So with EigenLayer and with all of these other things, do you see bridges growing in adoption? If so, which ones or which implementations? Or do you see it becoming like a winner-takes-all market, or like they share the market?
I mean, it is a little bit different in Cosmos, and I guess like you also have like IBC as well, which is kind of I think it's a little bit of a different market, but I'm not sure what would you say in ETH? Like, is it ETH land, let's say? How different is it there with like EigenLayer?
Bridges are vitally important because we're on layer 2s now, and you got to get your funds out of ETH and bring them to Arbitrum or bring them to Base. But those are canonical bridges, right? So they're built into the layer 2. They're a native part of the layer 2. But then you separate that and you have other types of bridges running on Wormhole, right? Or on CCIP, Chainlink CCIP. And that's where you start getting those effects, right? I think canonical bridges, fine, a pain you got to deal with, not that big of a problem because they have it's inherently a native token, right? But external messaging protocols deciding where tokens end up, that becomes a risk. I don't know exactly how IBC works, or how the bridging aspect there works. How would you bridge ETH to the Cosmos world, for example?
I mean,
currently.
So, like you said, there is actually, for listeners there is a difference between canonical bridges and native bridges. Native bridges would be something that are hard-coded, or not hard-coded, but are put into the protocol. They're a part of the protocol. But, like in Osmosis's case, they had a governance vote, and they called a bridge off, and I think Axelar ended up winning it, and thus it became the canonical bridge by public adoption, and people voted on it with the Osmo token. I'm not saying if that's the right or the wrong approach, but it's technically not built in the protocol, but it is a canonical bridge, and you would bridge it that way.
Yeah, I think that's the only...
That would be one of the bridges. There's other ways of doing it with liquidity pools and atomic swaps using Connext, NXTP. You can look it up, open source project. But they originally partnered with Nomad, and then they had that whole hack because they used optimistic fraud proofs, God bless. But still, the base technology of NXTP is good. It's just a different approach. It's a liquidity swap. So you would bridge into Osmosis through Axelar. It's technically not a native bridge. It's a canonical bridge.
And this is because they have Squid as well, right?
And
Squid.
and Squid is
I think
the other
that
router.
was the other. But There's not that many.
Yeah,
There's like 2. But Axler and Squid are basically the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, they use the same routing, but the I think this is weirdly something
And
that...
I must say, like with in Cosmos land, like a lot of us don't use or like bridge Ethereum across. Like I've only done it just for like UX kind of purposes, just to see, because everything of mine is like, everything that I own is like basically Cosmos related, and I'm like, and it's like I haven't really ventured into ETHland, so, but yeah, that's the only kind of bridge that I've used before, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like literally the only one.
But how IBC works is it's different from a bridge. A bridge would be a liquidity on one side, external messaging protocol, liquidity on the other side. IBC is sending fraud proofs from one chain to another. In my opinion, IBC is the #1 innovation within Cosmos. It's the thing that changes it and makes it real. It's analogous, if you're a nerd, it's like analogous to TCP/IP, but for blockchains.
Can I ask a question? What do you guys think of, like, I mean, we kind of did touch on it before, but like the decoupling of the functionalities? Like, you did speak about Celestia, like briefly, about DA and like how safe this is. What do you feel about like separating like other parts, like consensus, etc., and doing this whole plug and play narrative? And I guess like Ethereum is adopting that a bit, but I don't know if it's to stay with, like, again, I don't know much about Ethereum, but like, again, is that to stay in kind of line with this like modularity narrative, or is that like really benefiting the tech, or is it because of scaling issues, or like what do you guys, I mean, I just bundled in a bunch of questions, but go for it.
For me, I think the modularity is useful as a means to an end. It's a narrative so you understand what is roughly happening at a high level. The reason why data availability is so big is because there is a concrete change to the protocol that needs to be made that will scale and make a better product at the end. Because if we take a way big step back, the only reason that decentralized finance has any sort of leg up on a centralized finance is by removing asymmetric powers and intermediaries and providing a cheaper product. And then hopefully a developer smarter than all of us will make a product that doesn't feel like you're taking a shower with your socks on. So with data availability, there's a concrete saving in gas fees, and enables a whole subset of products, and that is concrete and that is real, and there is a narrative and people have written about it a lot. So there's the narrative, but there's actually something behind it. With EigenLayer, it works and lives and dies on the economics, which none of us have seen. Now, spicy take, 90% of tech is all BS. Spicy take, this includes crypto. So if you are looking at something and you don't quite understand it, or you're just trying to get the narrative, I would say overtly that it is probably BS, unless you concretely know that it makes a change. Data availability, it's really dense, but you can sit down and read the white paper and kind of grok what it actually does. I can't do that with EigenLayer personally. And I do this full time. I don't know. Invest your money as you will. Caron, with the news.
For all its risks, I think modularity is the way to go. Yeah, but of course, done carefully. But I mean, we've already been seeing it taking place in ETHland, in block building, right? The whole MEV process has sort of been outsourced to relayers, to builders. And what was initially all being done in a single validator is now being done by multiple different parties. And over 90% of blocks are built by private entities, right, rather than the validator nodes themselves. And that's a kind of modularity that sprang up naturally, right? So sure, initially Flashbots started out with it, of course, but that was still a private entity coming up with a solution to something that was causing problems. And that's a good modularity. The Ethereum community wants to bundle it back into under its care, right? So they want to have enshrined proposer builder separation, which is cool, but I think modularity will win in the end because it allows, well, yeah, people who can do it better to come in and offer a better solution to a problem that we all face in this ecosystem.
Who do you mean by who can do it better? Who do you mean by this?
Well, the example would be builders, right? So external builders coming in saying, hey, I can take those transactions and I can sort them in a much more efficient manner than you can or than you are. And as a result, I should be rewarded for it. And yeah, and so that reward there entices other people to come in and say, hey, I can do it even better. And I think that applies to more than just building blocks. It also applies to, well, better ways of storing that data, storing layer 2 data, such as Celestia, right? But somebody else could come in and say, hey, I can do it even better than Celestia. EigenDA might be better. Who knows? Maybe. Drew knows.
I might know. Did you want to talk on that?
No, I was just going to say, like, I mean, we can also talk about, I mean, that's the next thing. It's like, it's like roll-ups then. A lot of people have strong opinions about roll-ups, like, and that's what Celestia really enables. Especially with, like, they have a roll kit, which is like the framework in which you can, it's using the SDK and basically all it does is roll-up is a chain, like a special chain that allows you to publish the data to data availability layer, another blockchain, in this case Celestia. And yeah, and then they handle DA and ordering. And it's like, if we're having the DA discussion, then do we need to have the roll-up discussion?
Do we? Yeah. Whew. Yeah. So, I mean, because it's not just roll-ups now, it's almost like roll-ups as a service.
Yeah.
We have people with roll-up stacks like Caldera. I think that's one that's becoming very popular.
Yeah.
But they're more or less just different clients that are acting as a sidecar to another client. And I guess these are kind of one of the computer science concepts to get. It's kind of like the Santa's not real of crypto. It's like how many nodes are run in the cloud? You don't want to know. How many of them are in Virginia, 20 minutes away from the CIA's headquarters? More than you would think. But besides, I mean, as far as rollups as a service, the only ones that I really know are Caldera, and I don't know if you guys know of any others.
Yeah, I know who Caldera is.
Yeah.
But other ones, yeah, I mean, yeah, roll kits like the framework in which you can build. We've mainly been working with them because the SDK is like so tied together with Celestia. But basically we're kind of, because we had consensus like inbuilt into the SDK, and you couldn't actually, we did talk about modularity a lot, like we're like, oh yeah, we're modular, but actually everything's tied together, and like you can't use another consensus engine, and if you do use another consensus engine, like you're gonna break everything, and it's gonna be really hard and like pulling teeth. And so we use Comet BFT, and yeah, like now it's finally, we're doing a lot more work to be able to decouple. And like luckily, but it's so much tech debt that like we have at the moment to be able to like get to that point as well. So like I feel like at the moment everyone's kind of shuffling, even in like modular land, like, you know, in Cosmos, like I think everyone's still trying to deal with a lot of this tech debt to shuffle around and try and, you know, make sure that like we're ready for when people want to start using rollups. And it is really difficult because we have old tech and like everything's coupled together. So like, yeah, we do present this narrative, but realistically, like we're trying to, there's a lot of work that goes into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
I don't know what it's like in your ETH
You don't want to
land.
know what it's like in my head.
No,
You
like
don't wanna
in
know.
ETH land, let's say, like, I don't know, like, is everything kind of, everyone's like trying to kind of like shuffle to get something new together, tech debt, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the money always finds a way. It's like water in a low space. It'll always find a crack, and it'll always find a way to create a new narrative and expand that, and then draw more money in. I think the realistic, credible neutrality isn't the different chains. It's having different validators in different jurisdictions so that one country cannot say, this is illegal, and then it actually has an effect. Because if that was true, then they would do that. In fact, they already have tried doing that. And so we've had credible neutrality, whether people like it or not, even with 70% of infrastructure within cloud, because people cannot regulate it. I think really the innovation that we have to be looking for is on a product front. And I think most people are failing in this, trying to apply what the core product is here to a place that it doesn't really need to belong. So, taking a step way back, is the product that is being sold is network effects and a distributed ledger. We have single entry accounting, double entry accounting, triple entry accounting. That is what a ledger is. That's basically what it is. It's a triple entry accounting, and you're using the blockchain as the third entry to this ledger. So what sort of projects need this sort of accounting? It needs to be entities that are transacting with money on chain, or transacting with money, where none of the entities can trust each other, and everyone needs to be able to read and append to this chain. If you do not satisfy all of those conditions, you should not create that product. You should not apply DLT to that product, generally. And that's kind of like what we see with people creating tokens for messaging apps and things like that. You just don't want to use it. Like, I don't want your token in the first place, and I don't want to use your app. And that's kind of the funny thing that I personally see happening on like a product level is even the most air quote successful crypto, Bitcoin, failed at its initial product. It wanted to be digital cash. Do you guys use it as digital? You guys pay for coffee with Bitcoin? No, you don't. You use it as a store of value. And that's not what it was even remotely intended to be. So really, the value is in the triple entry accounting of it. And so I guess this is the Santa's not real part of the talk, is that it is irrelevant if the app chains and monolith chains converge if they're applied to the wrong product. Both sides, I believe, like monolithic chains benefit from composability, and basically like all the tokens you can trust what they are. And application-specific chains benefit from having a protocol which you can make to fit your product. But at the end of the day, if the product is not meant for the technology, don't make it. Bird up.
Nice closing
Thanks.
remarks.
Any final thoughts, Caron? We're done here.